My name is Priya Shah, and this is how I create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else. Hi there, it's Martine Severin here. Welcome back to This Is How We Create. In the guest chair today, we are welcoming Priya Shah. Priya is a Chicago creative and entrepreneur, and she has built a network of artists and collaborators dedicated to igniting social awareness and change through art and imagination. During our time together, Priya will share her wide-ranging career about how she has come to create her organization, The Simple Good. This conversation kind of picks up where our talk with Dr. Charmaine Jackman left off. In this case, we are going to focus on social emotional learning, on negative self-talk, and on what it means to focus on the simple good in life. All right, so let me share a bit more about Priya. Priya began volunteering in developing countries at a young age, which inspired her to fill the gap between business and the social sector. Priya has a passion for art and travel, and this passion has fueled her to help better communities in Chicago and around the world. Through her experience, Priya has developed a unique perspective on humanity, and she believes it's her responsibility to engage communities in need. Her purpose took shape when she founded The Simple Good, which is a nonprofit with the mission to connect the meaning of good from around the world and empowering youth to become positive activists through art and discussion. By uniting under a universal truth, Priya hopes to bridge understanding across all walks of life in order to bring down obstacles separating us in working towards improving the lives of our children and in turn our future. She's the co-author of the latest children's book focused on representative literature called Sheroes of COVID-19, and also the producer on the upcoming documentary Project Building Hope, documenting the journey of spreading art and resilience from Chicago to East Africa. Welcome to the show, Priya.
Thank you, Martine. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk with you because you just fell on my radar fairly recently, and I am so happy. I'm like, where has she been all my life? I am so inspired by everything that you do, and I'm really excited to talk with you today. You have such a wide ranging career, from the charity work that you've done to having attended business school to modeling to starting up Simple Good and working for other organizations such as the Obama Foundation. Can you tell us, like, how do you do it all?
I don't know. I asked myself that myself. Some just kind of you just keep going and then you pause and you're like, wait a minute, what is happening around me? But these are all have been really true blessings in my life, and because of that, it doesn't really seem like work at all. It's been all been eye-opening experiences that allow me to learn about myself constantly as well as the world, and then shift that together.
So, do you think that the younger Priya would be surprised as to what you've done thus far in your life and about where you are now?
I think, part of younger Priya when I was really young might have been surprised. And that was at a time when I was told a lot of no's in my life and told everything that I couldn't be. And so I think from that young girl to see everything that I could achieve, I think she would be very excited and surprised at the same time. But I think that because I was confronted with a lot of obstacles early in life, it really was what put me in this really strong trajectory of being resilient towards other people and wanting to show what is possible, right, and proving people wrong. So I think a little later, if you saw me in like middle school and high school, this wouldn't be as surprising because I always did have like a large vision for myself in the world. And I just always hoped that one day I could achieve that.
Do you mind sharing with us as to what some of those obstacles you faced were?
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in a community where there weren't that many people that looked like me. It was a very diverse community, but there weren't that many Southeast Asians like me in that community. And so, like many communities where you're the only one that looks like yourself, you can feel a lot of different forms of oppression and stereotypes and assumptions that I had to always navigate through growing up. And also, just being a woman in this world is always has been and continues to be oppressive. That takes place in a lot of different forms depending on the cultures that you're in. So both being a part of an Indian culture and an American culture, I found different forms of oppression within that. And I also am born with one hand, so that's a character about me that the world still doesn't understand, right? We have so many movements about racial identity, religious identity, gender identity. But when we talk about being physically born different than a lot of humans in the world, there really isn't that much space or progress in that area. And so I was born, I felt, with a lot of assumptions about what was not possible for me, and just always being in a negative space about who I was because of what society was telling me, what they would accept. And so, as a kid, being confronted by all of these different obstacles, you kind of just sit and think to yourself, like, why is the world so hard? I remember myself thinking that at 6 years old, and at that age, every child is just thinking about good in the world and their possibility. And so, at such a young age, for me to be really reflecting on life in that way was a difficult thing that I had to maneuver pretty early on. Those are the reasons I have kind of navigated in this trajectory, I think, is because of those things I had to face as a child.
I feel you about seeing the injustices when you're very, very young. And to see those injustices and actually wondering why they exist. And in terms of people who have disabilities, and I think that it is the last area where we all really need to do a lot more work. I'm part of this organization where we created this document where we were trying to figure out how to be more inclusive in the organization. And all of the folks who were in that organization, we were all able bodied. And we completely left out those in that the members that we serve who have disabilities. It didn't even occur to us. And I think that there was so much shame in that. We had to come to terms with the privilege that we had and had to kind of say, well, then how do we do better? And I think in doing better, it's just having more conversations with folks and being willing to learn as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the challenge is that a lot of times when you don't have that representation, or sometimes you don't realize that representation is in proximity of you, you end up silencing a group because it's not seen as valued. So I think, like, we still have a lot of progress to be made. And I hope that through the movements that are happening now, we can extend these conversations into places of ableism, which is, really not touched at all, right? Our world is not inclusive of people that are born differently. And I think that is once we can address that, like a lot of these other issues that we also struggle with can have some different level of perspective too, of like how can we operate and live together in a true cohesive way.
I am wondering how despite being very young and noticing that, yes, you were different and you were treated differently, but yet you saw the good in the world and you've gone on to be the ambassador of good. I am really curious as to how, even as a child, I think that things could have gone either way, right? You continue to see the good and the possibility in the world, but it could be that the way that, you grew up, you could potentially have not seen the good and had become the opposite of that. Have you thought about which factors that influenced you to where you are now and to how you see yourself, how you see the world in such a positive way?
Yeah, I do. I growing up, I did struggle with like how people treated me and like what they saw of me. And I saw a lot of examples of people going through the same thing, and their reaction is to be negative and frustrated and angry. And, when you're surrounded by that, you think that's the appropriate way to act. And it didn't get very far for it with me, because there were, good people around me that kind of put me in check and say, this is not it. And so I think that point of influence I do take in perspective a little bit more as I grew up. But what really hit me when I started seeing different forms of resilience outside of, growing up as kids, you think that a lot of the negative things that happen to us are just happening to us, or like our little bubble. Because of that, there may be a lack of hope. And it was when I started, I volunteered at Mother Teresa's orphanage in India. And that's was like such a powerful moment for me, because there were kids who had gone through so much within such a short period of time on this earth. And they had the ability to see beauty in other people and around them, and had that skill set to acknowledge it. And I really had to step back and think about, like, what am I complaining about, right? And how have I not learned to really see the gratitude and the good around me? Because that's what really kept them resilient. That's what really kept them hopeful about life and how to move forward as a human being on this earth in the most positive way that enhanced their possibility to survive. And I had to just really reflect on myself about, there are a lot of good things about me that not necessarily people regularly pointed out, but I knew it existed, right? I knew that I was an artist, and I knew that I could make people happy through my art. I knew that I had this ability of engaging with folks in a unique way. Like, I started reflecting on all these things, and it made me realize that was really was going to enable my possibility. That was really going to get me to move forward as a person, when I embraced those things. And that's what truly even made me happy, right? It made me feel good. And it was really that small moment of being confronted by that truth that made me advocate for the good that always does exist around us. And for us to not only acknowledge that for ourselves, but for each other, in order to create more safer, thoughtful environments that enhance the growth of us as human beings, both spiritually and physically. And I think that we don't have a habit as a culture to focus on that, right? It's a lot of a negative bias everywhere we go. And I think that teaching needs to happen at a young age so that we can embrace that as a larger community. And so that's really what propelled, like, this idea of the simple good, and this movement that I knew that I had to create in order for us to just move forward as a society. So yeah, that was that really pivotal moment of me just changing not only my trajectory, but what I wanted to put out into the world.
Goodness, there's so much to unpack there. First, how does one get an internship at Mother Teresa's orphanage?
Well, it was like a volunteer opportunity through my high school. I had a very unique high school that had a Southeast Asian Studies program, which is also unique in itself. And every couple of years, they organized a trip to India. And I was the only Indian person on that trip, because, like I said, my community did not have many people that came from my background. So I got selected to go on the trip, and I had that opportunity to engage with nonprofits all across the country, and just learn about the country in a different lens than I was used to. Because, when you go with your family, you're visiting through that lens, and also through that perspective of what is poverty and what is, your fortune, through what they believe, right? But then when I went outside of my family, I got a whole other different perspective that really opened my eyes to how we perceive the world and the narratives that we tell each other to allow certain inequities to exist.
I think that you've hit on such gold in terms of thinking about resiliency and gratitude and knowing that good exists, because if good doesn't exist, I don't know what else one should do. Obviously, being in the US, we have such a bias, as you mentioned, towards everything that's negative. And turning that around and being an advocate for the good, but an advocate as well for our mental state, to make sure that our mental state has I want to say proclivity, prefers to see the good and prefer it instead of the bad. Yesterday, our son was putting something away. He was putting his toys away and he dropped one. He's like, "Oh, I'm so stupid." And I stopped right there. And I felt like we needed to have an intervention because you cannot talk to yourself that way.
Yeah.
I think it should be banned to talk to yourself that way, because I think the extension of talking to yourself in such a negative way then extends to the world too. Because if you're okay talking to yourself in such a way, that means you're okay to talking to somebody else in such a way. And if you do that, then you are getting really far from the good and seeing the good in people.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing is like a lot of how we treat each other is a reflection of how we treat ourselves. And that's, we'd started, I've been doing, DEI is such a hot topic right now, diversity and inclusion. And I've been also have worked in that space and now using our curriculum to do trainings with corporate and nonprofits around, diversity and inclusion. And the first thing that I teach is that the only way that you're going to connect to the world is by first connecting to yourself, right? And finding the good within yourself so that you can really truly find good within others and understand them through that lens. And I think we do have the habit of being hard on ourselves, and so it's very easy to project that upon others and treat, people insignificantly because of that.
It's so true though. Externally, when you're little, you look for the good from others. You look for others to tell you that you're good or you're bad. If that continues, then you're not able to create that self-awareness and self-agency to know that you can choose another path, and you can choose a path of connection and connecting to yourself. But talking about connecting to yourself, I'd love to chat about social emotional learning. And when did that happen for you in terms of thinking about social emotional learning and how that could be a tool for engaging with not only oneself, but also with others? When did that make a connection for you?
It's always been a connection. I've always been super and deep reflective person, and partially it's because I did have a lot of obstacles earlier in my life, and I was a strange kid that wanted to find a solution to these feelings, and I would read, philosophy and different spiritual languages and poetry and art were like my mediums to really understand the world. By being that like self-aware and self-reflective, it made me also be very aware of others and things that we need to do together to connect to each other. And so this was like a process I had been always engaging in throughout my life. And when we first started the Simple Good program, the methodologies and the themes that I was having students explore turned out to also align with this term called social emotional learning, which was a pretty new topic at the time that I started the program. A lot of people were not talking about being mindful or even emotional development in general. And what ended up happening was it was a very organic, natural connection to SEL of like what I was trying to teach, which was self development, to these kind of key standards that were in place to get there. As we were developing out the program and the curriculum, the two just kind of went hand in hand. And I started, kind of really jumping into social emotional learning and the methodology behind that and integrating it a lot more into our programming and how we teach our students. So, like, short answer was I was always really into SEL, and I had no idea that this is what I was practicing already.
What about Simple Good? How did it come about? Because I can imagine that if you are really interested in SEL and you know about emotional intelligence and social emotional intelligence, why did it take the shape of Simple Good? Did you consider some other ways in terms of incorporating those methodologies and helping others thrive by teaching them those methodologies?
Well, how Simple Good came about was a very like organic, beautiful story. It actually started with a blog that I started called The Simple Good that went viral. And it was a blog that, me and a few of my friends collectively made with 50 different photos of different notions of good from around the world. These like small everyday moments of joy that brought us happiness and brought us some sort of peace. And what we realized is that it was those small everyday moments that really connected us as human beings and really could be found anywhere you go in the world. And so this was a conversation I had when I was in my first corporate job at Ernst & Young, and I grew up as a creative, so needing something that could be an outlet for me there. We started with 50 photos and then asked the world to submit their own ideas of the simple good. And within a week, the blog went viral. And we started getting submissions from all over the world, people from Italy and China and Brazil, like sharing their moments of joy with us, just to learn from each other and also learn from other people and what their moments of simple good were. And it was really amazing to see that people are willing to be vulnerable for a brief moment in time in order to connect to one another. And we got all these different messages about how like they were so grateful that we were doing this and how this is what we need to focus on and think about. And it was just really amazing that all these different examples were getting flooded in, and a lot of them are really very much the same, right? It was photos of kindness, like an act of love, memories about our family members, a sunset, a scene in nature. These types of things happen everywhere where we go, and that's what really connects us as human beings. And so I really wanted kids to in Chicago to be a part of this dialogue and be a part of the blog, because after all my travels around the world doing poverty alleviation work, I realized something unique about Chicago, which it happens in a lot of cities everywhere in the world, is that you are completely judged as being negative because of where you're born and what you might look like, right? And I wanted to show that everybody has the capacity for goodness and provide that platform for kids to speak on that. I approached a few teachers on the south side of Chicago and I asked, I have this blog, I want your kids to be a part of it. I'll buy the supplies and throw them a final showcase. And that's what really birthed the first program that we did under this notion of finding the simple good in our lives. That was so successful because what it allowed for our kids to go through was really enabling the process of cope, right? Giving the space of us to really express the things that are happening to us and really create hope by understanding and surrounding ourselves by this notion of goodness, which is what really fuels resilience. A lot of the international work I did around the world was really about teaching and learning resilience. And we do that by instilling goodness within ourselves and reminding ourselves of how that is surrounded, we are surrounded by it, and fueling that for more of a positive outcome. So it was really birthed from, my journey that led into this artistic creative path inspired by me being by an artist, and it has unfolded into the program that we see today.
I love it on so many levels. I guess the first thing that really comes to mind is Chicago is an interesting place. It's a beautiful place. The people are beautiful here, but I think that it has a very bad reputation, obviously, of being a violent place because of the number of shootings that happen here, and ends up happening when people are seeing violence and they're seeing poverty. They end up being very stressed, as you know. And are you familiar with the term toxic stress?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so I worked way back in the day at the organization that developed that term and did a lot of the research on early childhood development. And what happens with children when they are really stressed and they're stressed, that stress never gets alleviated through hugs, through a pause, is that that stress then gets basically it impacts them at the cellular level, and it affects them over the life course. And I love that this program alleviates that process. It stops that process. And not only that, it stops the process by letting them know that there is hope, that there is good in the world, and that they can become resilient. But not only that, but then that they can stop the process, and that it gives them a sense of self-agency. And having done a lot of research and in early childhood development, and having done a lot of work with developing nations, it's so important for us to be able to teach a lot of that, a lot of self-agency to these populations, because that's just the way that we can all improve. That's how they can then have better economic outcome and to their health. It's so essential to their health over the life course. And it's so amazing. This part probably won't make the cut, but I just wanted to say.
No, it's so true though, because they have all these programs that are workforce placement and getting kids in jobs or activities and that sort of thing, and I'm just like, there is a step before that needs to happen, where we're putting our kids in a mental behavioral state that will even allow them to be productive in those opportunities. A lot of times it's that, like, they are still hopeless, right? And it's going into their bodies, where now they're not even functioning because of that state that they're in. So we need to really focus on that level of like mental health and their ability to connect with other human beings in a positive way, by instilling that hope, so that they can take advantage of these opportunities. They can keep a job. They can uplift themselves out of economic poverty alleviation. Because the thing is like, giving people stuff will only last for so long. We have to empower each other to get to the place that we want to be in. It's really, our program's just really about building communities from the inside out, right? And then starting with that piece of hope that we can instill in each other.
And just imagine the opposite of that, building a community where everyone in the community doesn't think that they're a mistake.
Yeah.
Where they think that they can get better, they can have better life outcomes. I mean, it's just it's mind-blowing, really.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is the problem right now, right? We're not taught about ourselves and the things that we have within ourselves. There is no way that you can figure out your possibility, because we're running around not knowing who we are. And that is incredibly dangerous, right? Because you're more likely to be controlled, you're more likely to be unhappy, and then you will act out because of that feeling that's within you. And therefore, that's why I think our program is just so important to instill within the education system at a young age, to challenge human beings to really explore who they are, so that they can be assets to society and humanity by giving that guidance early on. It's kind of a weird thing to like go through high school and then college and all of a sudden say like, okay, pick something you want to do. Nobody has an answer for that usually. We're bred to really figure that out earlier. I think we would have, so many less lost people, and people that are really adding to humanity in a productive way.
And it also seems as if during this time as well, coming off the last administration and in a pandemic, there's no better time to think about good and to think about seeing the good in the world than now.
I think the pandemic really shed some light about what are the things that matter, right? And I think it also got people to resonate with our work a lot more deeply too. You're really getting forced to see the little things in our life that really do matter. And this concept of the simple good is now well more understood than it ever has been, because you're forced to be put in a certain type of perspective, which is really, exciting. And I hope people will take these kind of lessons of what really matters and pushes that forward towards a way better behavior and interactions that we have with each other.
Beautiful. So I'm really, in reading your bio, one of the things that stuck out at me is that you're a strategist. And, you went to, one would not think that someone who grew up being well versed in art considering herself an artist from a very young age, would grow up to go to business school. Uh, how did that come about?
It was really inspired by my work abroad. I did a lot of volunteer work in India. I was in South Africa. I was in Brazil, and I worked with a lot of community organizations and grassroots organizers and that sort of thing. And it was really interesting to see that there was such amazing work being done on the ground, and a lot of it wasn't sustainable because there was no support. And there were two groups of people with business and social community, social groups that really needed to work with each other, and they never could because they didn't speak the same language. It was almost like the two different sets of people that couldn't communicate. And I really felt like that was really what was needed. I realized that, it's a very much of a privilege to go to university. Most people in this world do not get to do that. And so let me study something that I could hopefully eventually bring back to these communities and support them in a way that, they don't have the skill set to, and hopefully tie those two worlds together in the way that I possibly could facilitate. That was my dream and a subconscious goal about going into accounting and finance as a kid. It was shocking to my friends too, who saw me show up at business school, and they're like, I thought you were going to be in art school. And I was like, nope, here I am sitting next to you in accounting class. I'm going to figure this out. So that was really the inspiration of why I chose this path.
And I think it's one of those under appreciated skills and skills that folks should learn, accounting and finance. It's something that we have to do in our everyday life. And I would think in starting an organization, starting anything, you need those skills. I was thinking about taking an accounting class myself.
Yeah, you definitely need it. It's a definitely brutal class. It was not easy for me to sit through, but I'm very grateful that I did do that because a lot of, what it is really was key for me to start this organization, to know how to understand the finances, be comfortable with numbers, and organize a business is really, that's kind of the foundation of it. And I think a lot of, people that are really well intentioned to help the community and the creative world don't have always have those skill sets, and so it can be a challenge to get things off the ground if you don't have that. So I always say, like, for every creative, and everybody in general, learn something in college that's creative and also that's like a hard skill set, and bring those two together, and that's how you can really create something innovative.
And it looks like you've done that in such a beautiful way. I think that culturally, we always associate anything having to do with money, finance as bad. Um, but you're doing that and creating good. And I'm not saying money is bad at all. I'm saying that I think people sometimes are scared of going into those fields because they think that it's overwhelming in one way or another. But I'm so glad that you're doing it with style.
No, thank you.
All right. So I would love to talk about some of the things that have been really surprising to you since starting The Simple Good. Any stories that you have to share with us as you've gone along the journey that completely either were unexpected or blew your mind?
I don't know. I mean, I think what's been such a blessing about this journey and the path is the incredible people and the walks of life that have just come into my world and my bubble and have shared their wisdom with me that I can pass on to other people. Things that you would not expect to learn from strangers, that feel comfortable enough to share these truths with me has been so incredible, right? It's really like, feels like angels falling from the sky that are leaving their wisdom for me to pass on. And I get those types of moments all the time, and it's magical. Like a most recent story that I've been telling people a lot, especially in light of the riots, is that we don't really listen to our elders as much, and they have a lot of wisdom. So creating that culture of listening to people that came before us. And there was an older person that I worked at a co-working space before COVID and everything shut down. And there was an older person that would come into this office, into our office to learn how to read, because it was a literacy group in the space. And he came into, we had a group meeting, and he came in because he wanted to voice that he really enjoyed art. And, that had become his form of literacy. And there was the cultural center was about to take away that painting group that he was a part of, that he would always join, and he wanted to do something about it or keep it going. And so nobody in the room could really help him, unfortunately. So I came up to him and I just told him about our work, and if there's any way I could help and support him, I would love to do that. So we became friends pretty quickly. And it turned out that he shared with me that he's actually originally from Mississippi. He used to live on a plantation and basically was an indentured servant because his grandparents lived on the plantation. And in order to live on the plantation, you had to work. And they couldn't work. So um, his parents sent him over to live with the grandparents to work for them. Basically sharing that he was living pretty much a life of a slave. He said that, one time that he got into a fight with one of the white boys on the plantation. He was like, we just got into an argument. But I guess that kid went and told his dad, and then they came and were looking for him. And somebody told my friend, they're like, you need to hide right now. And so he quickly hid under a ditch and barely missed them. They came over by him and walked right over him, and he could hear them say, like, we're about to hang that N. And they never found him after that. And so it was such a eye-opening story that somebody within our lifetime and in our space are going through these things that we think that are history, right? And still he has this ability to carry himself in a way that's like such lighthearted and spirited in such a positive way, but with the mission to like pass these experiences on so that we can learn from them. And I think like it's moments like that when people share such strong stories, in the most random ways sometimes, really are powerful moments for me, because it makes me reflect on me, and then now my, accountability to share these lessons with other people so that we can all learn from them. So that's kind of my long story of like these powerful things that always happen. I reflect on it quite a bit.
It's that's a beautiful story, and I think for me it reminds me that or others have so many amazing stories to tell, and we just have to be there and be silent and be ready to listen so that people can share their wisdom with us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how we become better people. Storytelling is just so powerful. It's just about us listening, like you said.
So I know that you, one of the things that you do is you are a writer or at least an author. I remember reading that you created a simple good coloring book, and now you're the co-author of a children's book focused on representative literature that's called Sheroes of COVID-19. And so you are keeping very busy. But knowing that you've loved art since you consider yourself an artist and you've been doing art since you were a little girl, what are you doing these days in terms of what are you creating these days, I should say?
Well, I always say the simple good is my art. It's something that I continue to feel like I put a lot of my creative mind into in order to make it what it is. What I would love to get back into is my drawing and painting practice. That was something that I grew up with, and my goal is to do an exhibition of my artwork, just reflecting on all my experiences with this journey that I'm on. And because, just like I said, I have so many amazing interactions that I feel like so many people should learn from. And my goal is hopefully getting back into my practice so I could share that on a different medium and a different vein. Short answer is I'm not doing my true practice of art, which I wish I could, but I'm practicing my creativity in other ways.
But I guess one's creativity is art, right? And I think we often think
Yeah.
about it in specific ways in terms of it being a physical product that one creates or through music or whatever. But I think what you're doing is helping people see their true spirit and be their true selves and be their best selves in the most universal way possible. And I think that's an art. That's a rare skill to be able to help people actually listen, because so many people have blockers to that they've been so conditioned they can't see past that. And I think you're doing your art.
Thank you. I'm glad you see that. I think so too. I think this has truly been my art and my practice. And yeah, it's been, and just like with any art practice, you discover yourself through that. And I think this has definitely done that for me.
We've been listening to your voice and have been hearing about all the amazing work that you are doing and that you continue to do. But I do wonder if you could just answer this one little question for our listeners. So, what is one thing about you that we would not know by just listening to your voice?
Well, I guess we talked about it earlier, but I'm born with one hand. So I don't think most people would assume that, especially with everything that we do, people don't talk about, what we look like. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is I have really long black hair, and I typically enjoy it, but I think it's time for a haircut at this point after the pandemic. So it's gotten to an unusually long place right now.
Well, I recently shaved all of my hair off. I used to have locks all the way down my back, and then I chopped it into a
Oh,
bob, and then
oh
I
my God.
totally shaved it off last year around this time actually. So
Wow. How did that
it
feel?
felt really good. And I have to say that, Priya, one of the reasons why I did it is right after the death of both Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. I
Oh,
was feeling so many emotions, and I needed to understand those emotions, and I needed to see myself in a different way. I needed to see all of me,
mm.
and I did not want to hide any parts of myself. And I took the drastic measure to cut all my hair off. And I honestly, I've never felt more beautiful once I did it. And each time the hair grows and I shave it back, once I look at myself in the mirror, that's my automatic thought to myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. And I like to see all of my face because I don't want to hide anymore.
Oh, I love it. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I totally feel that because you're at your, purest, rawest form, and for you to truly see that and see that as your simple good, I think that's incredible.
Oh,
Good for
it's my
you.
simple good. Yay! All right. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming on and for sharing your work with us and for reminding us that there is nothing but good in the world and that we have good in everyone has good in them, and to focus on that and to focus on healing ourselves through thinking about mindfulness and kindness.
Yes, exactly. I hope we can all do that and encourage that from each other. So thank you for allowing me to share this with
Thank you,
everybody.
Priya. Bye.
Bye.